Hey folks, you're listening to the Java Easily podcast, episode number 1.
Java Easy. News, tutorials, tips. Everything you need to know as a beginner Java developer.
Hi there, welcome to the first episode of the Java Easily podcast. My name's Matt Speak, I'm your host, and what we're going to do in these episodes, basically just give out tips, tricks, advice, and insights as to what it's like being a professional Java developer, and hopefully help you out too with your Java development career if you're either just starting out or you're already a Java developer and you're looking to get more experience. So, given that we're in episode 1, I guess it makes sense to have a little bit of an introduction to myself, I suppose. I don't normally like these kind of things. I don't particularly like talking about myself, but yeah, I think it's useful to know who's talking to you at the other end of the, I was going to say the phone, at the other end of the phone. It's not a phone, of course, it's a microphone, which I'm just talking into. But in any case, who is this guy? Who is this Matt Speak guy? So my name's Matt Speak. I'm a professional Java developer. I've been doing Java development now for well over 20 years, I guess. I'm originally from Leeds in the north of England, but I moved down to the south of England to a town which is kind of outside London. You can kind of class it as London, but it's not really London. But it's about a 35-40 minute journey by train into London, which is next to Windsor, which you may have heard about, where Windsor Castle is, which is one of the places that the Queen of England lives. And it's also around the corner from the next town along called Staines, which is where Ali G's from, which you may have heard of, although I'll restrain my booyakashas for another time maybe. But yeah, and also it's around the corner from Heathrow Airport as well. So it's fairly kind of well located in the UK, particularly if you're doing international travel and you want to get into London. My wife's from New York, so being next to Heathrow Airport is kind of useful. And we've got a daughter who's absolutely beautiful, and we have a dog as well, who sometimes may bark during these episodes in the background, and I'm sorry if that happens, but she's a particularly boisterous West Highland Terrier. We've also got a couple of budgies as well, and some fish, and the list of pets seems to be ever increasing, as it does if you've got a 7-year-old. Anyway, yes, so I came down to, in my head I came down to London, in quotes, but it's, as I say, it's not really London, it's a place called Egham, and there's a university called Royal Holloway, which is actually part of the University of London, and I studied computer science. And I came down and did that in 1996, but up until that point, I just lived and grew up in Leeds. So at university, I enjoyed that for the most part. I didn't really do as much studying as I should have done, to be honest, looking back at it. In fact, pretty much most of the stuff that I've learned around computer science, or more specifically around programming or professional software development, I've pretty much learned on the job. So I spent a lot of time reading a lot of books, going to different training courses, and I've worked at some incredible places, and I had one of my first kind of starts, as it were, with a really good mentor. That's a dog. At a place called Valtech, and that was in London, which is a consultancy firm. And that was kind of nice because that consultancy firm was good because it did two things. One was it did development consultancy. So in other words, they put you out onto particular projects and then you do whatever development work you had to do, so whatever project they wanted you to work on, that kind of thing. But also as well, in addition to that, it was also training consultancy. So it gave training courses as well. And the standard of the training courses was phenomenally high, and because I was in that consultancy firm, a side benefit of that, in fact the biggest benefit for me personally, as far as I'm concerned, was the fact that I had access to these training courses. Also I became friends as well with a really good guy there who was one of the trainers, and in general I learned a lot when I was there, and that's really when I became properly, I'd say, interested in Java, but interested in Java at a kind of a deeper level than just using it as a basic kind of programming language. So yeah, I worked there for a little bit, and after that I moved on to various different places, and I became pretty much, I guess, within like 2 to 3 roles, I became a contractor, so like a freelance Java developer. And I don't know if you're familiar with the term, but in the UK, a contractor basically means that you're not a permanent member of a staff, so you're not a full-time employee, but instead you have a short period contract which you work under. And the idea is that in that particular space of time, you get the project done, and then you're either renewed or maybe you move on to a different project at another company. And because of the fact that it's short term and you're not kind of like, part of the furniture of a company, as it were, because of that fact, you end up getting more money, which for me at the time was fantastic because I was pretty young, I was in my 20s, and, the idea that I could get pretty much twice as much cash for doing kind of like the same job as a permanent employee, although I actually thought it would be kind of like a more advanced type thing, but it turned out in reality it really isn't, to be honest. That was just a really good thing which mapped out well for me. Not least because of the cash, obviously, but the main reason for that, the main reason why it was good for me personally, was from a professional development point of view. So if you're a contractor, Because your contracts are normally 6 months or maybe a year in length, what's really good about it is that it gives you an opportunity, kind of like a forced opportunity really, to be able to evaluate when the contract's either coming up for renewal or the contract's about to end, where you want to go and what you want to do. And it forces you in that respect to be kind of cognizant about the decisions you're going to make in your career. So for example, if you're working with a particular technology or in a particular organization and you're not, you kind of feel that you've had enough exposure to that particular technology, or you've learned what you can from there, or indeed you want to move on and find like a different challenge in a different area, or work with a different type of technology or a different kind of organization. So maybe you're in, for example, a retail e-commerce web development position before, and then maybe you want to move into banking or something and work in a different sector. This kind of contracting model, it gives you that opportunity, that kind of forced opportunity at regular intervals to reevaluate your career, which I think is really great from a professional development point of view, because then, you can kind of like, it's almost like a choose your own adventure type thing. Do you remember those books where you could choose your own adventure? You get to a certain, you read like a chapter or so, and then it says at the end of the chapter, do you want to go left into the cave, or do you want to go right up the mountain? And then you can choose basically where you want to go. And because of this, you can, kind of like shape your own development in a much more precise way than you can as a permanent employee. So true, if you're a permanent employee, you get other benefits, like for example, you get training, so there's normally like a training budget which is allocated. Although most companies, I find, in general, don't tend to stick to the training budget, so sometimes that can be negligible. But nevertheless, the difference is, instead of a company telling you how you're going to develop and developing you in accordance with their framework, instead of that, it's actually you that's deciding how you're going to develop, which is a much more autonomous model for professional development, which worked out well for me because, long story short, I learned a ton of different technologies, worked with some really cool people, and got a vast amount of experience working across different sectors, and that's now put me in a position where I can do things like online teaching, for example, in the online world, or alternatively, pick up another contract from a whole heap of different sectors, using different technologies which I wouldn't otherwise be able to have access to unless I'd had that background and experience before. So yeah, if you get the opportunity, I definitely recommend going contracting, because personally I think it's the very best way that you can develop yourself professionally. Although I would say that in order to do that, I think it's a good idea to really brush up your skill set so that you know things inside and out before you start tackling those kind of contracting interviews, because a lot of the times they can give you quite a grilling on the tech side, which is good. I actually kind of like it because it's nice to have a good, varied kind of like conversation at a very deep level about technology, because I like that. I'm very passionate about technology. But when you first do a few of those, it's pretty intimidating, to be honest, especially as like a 20-something-year-old when you're still kind of trying to prove yourself and you're still trying to find your feet and all that kind of stuff, which I remember is how I felt when I was back then. So if we zip forward career-wise, most of my contract positions have been in investment banking. So I've worked at large global investment banks such as Goldman Sachs, Lehman Brothers, HSBC. I've worked in the Netherlands as well, in Amsterdam for ING, maybe in AMRO, Fortis, and I've also worked as well in New York too for a mature tech startup company over there. But the majority of my stuff has been based in London. So doing the circuit, as it were, working for the banks in the city of London that is, the square mile where a lot of financial institutions are based, or in Canary Wharf, or Docklands as it's known, which is where we have the kind of skyscrapers in London, where some of the banks are there as well. Now, about 3 years ago-ish, I guess it's coming up to about 3 years ago, I started to get into online training. So I posted my first course, which I was really excited by, and that got me a foot in the door with online training. And since then, I've basically been expanding that and building that up. And I've got, I think it's about 8 courses now on a few different areas, kind of like the main areas which intermediate Java developers would be interested in. So there's courses on Apache Maven, Java 8 and functional programming, JUnit and Mockito for unit testing, Spring Framework, Spring Boot, and Groovy. One's an Introduction to Java course for complete beginners, which you can check out if you go to courses.javaeasily.com, and that'll get you set up basically with the tools you need to be able to develop Java and what coding in Java actually looks like, which I think is a good place to start for a beginner Java developer. Now, first and foremost, the reason why I got into online training is because I really love to help people. It gives me a real buzz to be able to see a spark of passion that I have for something, like for Java technology, and to then see that spark kind of instilled in somebody else as they reach that kind of aha moment and they get a particular thing that they've been struggling with. So I'm really in this to help people, as many people as possible, and I have a kind of a crazy ambition, which is basically to make the Java Easily website and brand and the courses, the whole kind of ecosystem around that, the number one place to be able to get help and support with Java technologies for beginner and intermediate Java developers. So in order to do this, there are a few ways that you can interact, which I really encourage you to do. So if you've got any problems with Java, any queries, anything that you're not quite getting about how things work or how the technology hangs together, you'll be doing me personally the biggest favour possible by just either posting a question on the Facebook group, if you haven't joined already. I'll put links, by the way, to all these things in the show notes for this episode. Be either posting on the Facebook group or even sending an email to me personally, matt@javaeasily.com, asking you a question there. And one other thing is I'm also going to put on the website a mechanism where you can basically ask questions. So you can send me a voice snippet, like just a snippet of sound, an audio kind of clip if you like, to submit a question you've got. And then I can be answering those in future podcast episodes as well. So that's exciting. There's a lot of good stuff to come down the road. So stay with us and we're going to turn you into the very best Java developers that you can be. Anyway, that's it from me now. In future episodes, I'll be diving into different questions that I've got so far from people. Join the Facebook group if you haven't done so already. You can also check out the YouTube channel as well, where there's some sample lessons from some of the courses so far, but I'll be building that out again over the coming months. And until next time, take care, stay safe, and we'll speak soon. Bye.